Let's come back to the keywords of forward thinking again. Past events, current knowledge, anticipation, possibility thinking, and intuition. But this time I want to highlight possibility thinking and intuition. Daisy Saunders said, possibility thinking helps you to become a person of no limits. Albert Einstein said, the intuitive mind is a secret gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Now let's welcome Ms. Miriam Phillips to bring us her summary of forward thinking. Please.
Okay, so I'm not used to speaking with a mic, and I'm normally a very loud person. So, Scott, you may have to tone me down just a little bit. And the podium gives feedback, so all that buzzing you've been hearing, it's because we didn't anticipate that in the beginning. But now we know for next year. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about forward thinking and you. We've learned about forward thinking and the challenges you may face. We've learned about examples of forward thinkers. But they've been pretty famous people, right? Mark Cuban, Henry Ford, the Australian government. How does that impact you here in Northeast Tennessee? Well, I want to give you some examples of industries of everyday people just like you and me, where they implemented forward thinking. I also want to talk to you about change and how we're reluctant to change at times and the tension and the anxiety associated with change. And I want to talk to you about the cultural uncertainty principle that we're going to face as forward thinkers. And then most importantly, you're going to get to eat. So if anyone knows me and they've sat through one of my presentations or had me in class, they understand that I love quotes. I love me some quotes. So we're going to start off with a Machiavelli quote. For knowing afar off the evils that are brewing, they are easily cured. But when want of such knowledge, they are allowed to grow until everyone can recognize them, there is no longer any remedy to be found. We will not be addressing evils of moral issues today. I won't put you through an ethics class. But we can take a little bit of information and glean a little bit of insight from this quote. Mark Cuban saw something that no one else saw with the internet. He didn't wait for it to be there. He didn't wait for the evil to be present, as Machiavelli would say. He went out and made it happen. So within your organizations, within your classrooms, within your schools, within your businesses, within your nonprofits, identifying that trend and making something happen, that's how you become a forward thinker. So I spent 5 years in the marketing world. Most of you who know me know that. It was a love-hate relationship, I'll be honest. But you learn one thing in marketing. You get your Dilbert calendar, and you live by the days of Dilbert. So I must start with a Dilbert comic strip. Here Dilbert's working on some project, and we can relate to this. No matter what field we're in, what job we do, we all work on projects. We have to create things at some point in our life. But they want to know the final product. They want to know the final cost, the final risk, the bottom line. All too often, we don't know that bottom line, do we? And sometimes when we don't know that bottom line, that's what stops us. That's what gets us and keeps us from going forward. But Dilbert would tell you the uncertainty principle just says you don't know. And you need to give me the freedom to continue to create and spend your money. Now, we don't want to go that far. All you who are running organizations and running departments are thinking, well, there is such thing as a budget I have to stick by. But the idea of where something will go, we don't have to stop before we know the final product. We have to be okay with a minimal or even a large amount of risk. Mark Cuban risked it all in the beginning, and he told you in that video clip that it was a risk. He could be a billionaire or he would be broke. But it was a calculated risk. So not knowing the end result is not an excuse, nor is it a reason for us not to act. Forward thinking in the home industry. So this is the first industry I want to talk about. Many of you may know general contractors. Maybe a few of you are general contractors or have a family member who's a general contractor. I'm taking a lot of these examples from the book Microtrends, if you've read it. If not, it's on your recommended reading list in the symposium materials. What Mark Penn did in this book, it's small chapters after chapters of economic trends, looking at the history, which we have to do as forward thinkers, looking at the current trend, and looking at what that implies and what happened there. So the first example I want to use is general contractors and home builders. There is this historical trend, we all will agree with this, it's pretty common knowledge, doesn't take rocket science, that the way we structure our families implies or directly correlates to the type of house we want to live in, correct? If I have a large family, I do not want a 2-bedroom house. If it's just me and my husband, I do not need a 5-bedroom house, right? Well, what these contractors were doing is they were looking at how family structures were starting. Couples were waiting longer to start families. Couples were wanting smaller houses, maybe to create a nest egg, get some savings, wait a little bit longer, and then create a family, move up, get their starter home, then get the real home, as me and my husband called it when we made from one transition to the other. But there was a flip side going on too, and it was the boomerang generation. How many of you know what I'm talking about? You got some boomerangers out here, or do you have some kids moving back in with you? The boomerang generation was a generation where children grew up, parents were so glad to push them out the door, send them to college, get a job, and here they came right back. Hey mom, hey dad, kind of expensive out there, can I move back in? Maybe I'll bring my husband or my wife or my kid too. So when homeowners and constructors were looking at this, they're thinking maybe bigger houses are also an option. Small houses, large houses. Well, with these boomerang generations and with people taking care of parents, how many of you have a parent living with you now or know soon that maybe your parents will be moving in with you and you'll become a caretaker for them? That larger homes with privacy for 2 families was kind of essential. So they created this new concept of larger family homes with 2 master suites on separate floors to allow for some semblance of privacy. So these homeowners were buying houses very different. Their motivations were very different than the traditional homeowners of my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, who you bought that house that you were going to live in and raise your family in from the get-go. Right? We were buying smaller houses or we're buying larger houses for our immediate need. So across the country, general contractors were taking the time to create new blueprints, to create new ways of developing houses. Everyday people like you and me, people with bachelor's degrees, maybe some didn't even have a bachelor's degree, running a business maybe that their father or their mother had that they got passed down to them. But they saw the history of how family choices impacted homes. They saw the trend of how families were changing, and they saw the potential, the possibility. It was a risk, very calculated risk. These new homes that went up, they could have made it and they could have busted. And as we all know, 2007 happened and a lot of them did bust. But the concept was there, and some made a lot of money off of that. And still some of you, maybe when you're thinking about your homes or your children are thinking about the homes that they're going to purchase, they're thinking of it in this concept, the starter home then moving up, or the larger home for multifamily living. But all this has one core component, and that's change. And Stephanie did an amazing job talking about change and what forward thinkers do in change. When everything is the status quo, when everything is happy, they're uneasy. They want to move. They want to find something else. What's the next good thing? Now, I'll be honest with you. I struggle with this sometimes. When things are going good, I like them to go good. And that's my leadership challenge, is to push myself to look beyond. But there are other people who are just naturally acclimated to that. My husband seems to be one of those people. Wherever he works, whenever they got systems going well, he's always looking for the next thing. How can I make this more efficient? How can I make this better? Those are the people within your organizations that if you're wanting to strive to become a better forward thinker, that you need to buddy up with. You know, I'm lucky, I live with one. So hopefully a little bit of him will rub off on me in a good way, and I'll be a more forward thinker. But we have to understand that that uncertainty, that change, that little bit of resistance to change is okay. We don't want to jump in feet first without thinking about things, without that reflection phase that Erica spoke of. But acknowledging that change is difficult and change will cause us some anxiety is important. The second example, which shocked me, is vegan children. 50 years ago today, there were 0 vegan children in the world. Well, maybe I shouldn't say in the world. There were 0 vegan children in America reported on the census and on other Gallup collecting surveys. As of today, there are 1.5 million. Let's just stop and think about that. 1.5 million children between the ages of 8 and 18 that self-identify as vegan. Now that's a huge self-identification. I was a vegetarian in my early 20s, and vegetarian is just a food choice. I just don't want to eat meat, right? Vegan is totally different. You don't only not eat animal products, you don't use anything that involves animal products. So this is a lifestyle. So this is a huge commitment these children are making. But there was a lot of opportunity there for the forward thinkers who saw this. What historical trend, what historical event were they looking at? How could you have seen the possibility of there being a market for vegan children? Okay, I'll answer. It's just like class. If you don't want to say anything, I'll answer. I've got a big mouth. We historically know that the dietary choices of the parent, at some extent, influence the dietary choices of the child. So if your family grew up, like my family, eating a lot of soup, beans, and cornbread, when I was growing up, I loved nothing more than some soup, beans, and cornbread. When I left the South, I realized that's really not a normal meal. For these children, people were self-identifying vegan, and most importantly, women were maintaining their vegan lifestyle through pregnancy. This was the indicator. This was the history. The trend was the keeping of the vegan lifestyle through pregnancy and then starting children on a vegan diet. Naturally seeing that there's going to be a need there, right? There's some type of need if you're going to have vegan children. Where are they going to get their animal crackers? Who's going to make their Gerber? Where are you going to buy their clothes? I'm sure OshKosh B'gosh is not vegan friendly. This is where the industries, the everyday businesses, stepped up and said they saw the possibility and they took that risk. So you can now buy vegan baby food. You can now buy vegan clothing apparel lines. And most importantly, there are vegan children entertainment alternatives. The most famous being Vegan Steven, who's a little boy who adventures through the world sharing the vegan lifestyle and little tricks and trades of the vegan way. You know, it's kind of like VeggieTales, except for, well, I don't guess they eat them in VeggieTales either. I've never watched VeggieTales, I'll have to be honest. I don't have children, so I haven't been exposed to that yet. But this is what vegan children do. And this was a need. This was an opportunity to be a forward thinker. So with you yourself right now, within whatever your organization is, you serve a constituency, you serve customers. There is someone who needs your services. What is their history? What does history tell you about that population? What are the trends? Dr. Nolan spoke about massive online, the internet. We can look at how social media has changed business altogether. I mean, if you don't have a Facebook page now, your business is obsolete, I would think. The first thing I do when I find of a new business is I go, do they have a Facebook page? They have their menu up? Right? Restaurants is my favorite. Do they have their menu up? Do they have their hours posted? What are people saying about the food? If I pull up a place and they don't have a Facebook page, I immediately think, why? Do they not want people to write about it? Is the food not so great? What's the menu? Back in the old day, we just went and tried it out, right? But now we want to test out everything via the internet and via our friends before we take that leap. But you have that constituency. You have those customers within your organization. It's your job to think about the history, think about the trends, and see the possibility. Now, all this is great, right? See that possibility, see the history, find the trend. But there has to be some thinking involved. We have to all step back. We can't just jump in. I mean, I'm sure Mark Cuban, even though he said he could have made $1 billion or he could have been broke, he didn't just say, let's go for it. There has to be a questioning, a reflection phase. And in this phase, this is where we stop and we ask ourselves, why am I initially wanting to do this? Why am I reluctant to do this? What are the possible challenges I could face? What are some possible outcomes that may happen? Now, when the people were coming with the vegan children and they wanted to create the clothing line, the food line, or let's just do Facebook. When Mark Zuckerberg decided to create Facebook, he stopped and he saw that there was this need. People wanted to interact socially. They wanted to communicate socially and stay connected online. But there was a whole development phase, a testing phase, a questioning phase. Why was he doing it? How was he going to do it? And if you know a little bit about it, some of the dealings weren't so ethical or upright or honest, so we don't want to do that exactly. But we want to learn from that reflection, from those questions, from that insight. So when someone comes to you with a forward-thinking idea, or when you yourself have a forward-thinking idea, don't do as I warn my students and have that knee-jerk reaction to something, right? Stop, reflect, ask questions. What are my motivations? Why am I doing this? Why am I not doing this? Just because you say no, maybe that's not a bad thing right now. Maybe it needs to have a no for now. Go back to the drawing table, think about some other variables, and add them back. We don't want you to go in blindly and accept every idea or think every idea that you're going to have is going to catapult your organization to the next level. Because we all occasionally, I'm glad my husband isn't here, but we all occasionally have bad ideas. I've had a few. But we have to do that questioning phase. And we have to understand, as Rachel said, the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. The world is not going to stop and wait for us to get on board. Your service base, the people you serve, your customers, they're not going to wait for you to meet their needs. They're going to find someone else that's meeting those needs for them. So we have to be aware that that uncertainty exists and that it's not going to stop. And we have to be willing to make that change, to take that step, to be the one to take the calculated risk. It's difficult, it's challenging, but it's possible. It's possible for every one of us. And today I want to leave you with the words of Mr. Robert Frost, and I'm glad none of my students are here. I teach public speaking, so it's really bad that I have notes. And my husband told me to paraphrase, and I tried paraphrasing, but I just kept forgetting what I was paraphrasing. So I'm going to do it the old school way, and I'm just going to read it, so please forgive me. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And being one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, and to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for passing there, had really warned them about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted I would ever be back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Today, I implore you, I ask of you, when you have that chance, take that road that's less traveled by. Be willing to take that risk. Be willing to be the one to bring the new innovative idea, to think about the possibility, to think about the future. We're in a very pivotal point in our economy, in our education system, in our local economy. And if we keep doing the status quo, as Einstein says, and want something different to happen, we're all insane. So be that person who takes that chance. Be the one who travels the road less traveled by. And I think Daniel has a few announcements for you, and we'll get you to dinner or lunch very soon.